Hey there, and welcome to this tutorial on lighting and rendering in 3ds Max. So the first thing you'll need to do is to download the files that we're going to be using for this exercise. So they're up on the My UCA page in the 3D workflows section here. And if you come over here, you'll see there's a file called Lighting and Rendering Max Project Student Zip. So I'm going to click on this, and that will then be downloaded. So what I'm going to do after that is I'm going to make a new folder inside my OneDrive. So remember we discussed the OneDrive previously, but if you go to that, create a Week3 folder. And I'm just going to drag over the file that I just downloaded. So here's the one I just downloaded. I'm going to drag that over to my Week3 folder. So that's been added there. And then next, because this is what's called a zip file, so basically the contents of the file have been kind of packaged up and made smaller so that it can be downloaded more easily. But we're going to need to extract this before we can use it. So if I right click on it and go extract all, a little window comes up like this, and I can click on extract. And then I will get the actual contents here. So I can actually go in and delete the original file now. The one which had a zip on it, I can delete that if I want to, and this is now what I have. So this collection of folders is actually what's called a 3ds Max project. So it's often quite handy to have a project folder, and what it does is the actual scene file is in here inside the folder called scenes, but it's also got the textures that I'm using here. So if I go into scene assets and I think inside images, these are the textures for this scene. And what having a project does, it just kind of keeps everything in the right place so that 3ds Max is able to go in and find the textures, and it knows where to look for them basically. Okay, so let's open up the scene file. I'm going to do that from 3ds Max. So if you go ahead and open up 3ds Max, and we'll go over to File and then Open. And then basically you'll need to navigate to wherever that scene, whether that project is that you've just downloaded it to. So it'll be on your OneDrive. Mine happens to be over here. So let's just navigate here, and basically mine's here. And I'll click in here, and then what you need to do is click into the scenes folder. So click in there, and this is where the actual scene file is that we need to open up. So let's go ahead and open that up. I'm going to press continue there, and we will press OK. Great, so here's the scene that we're going to light. We've basically got this kind of coffee shop thing here. Now, the first thing that we want to do when we're setting this up is we're going to change the renderer over to the Scanline renderer, which is the renderer we're going to use today. So yeah, in order to do that, you'll need to basically load up the render settings. So this would be the teapot with a little cog symbol next to it. So if we click on that, and you'll see these render settings come up here. And yours may be set to Arnold or one of the other renderers. So we can go in and change that to the Scanline renderer, which is this one here. And then the next thing we want to do is to basically change the render settings, so the resolution. So by default they're at 1280 by 720, but we're going to increase that to be 1920 by 1080. So that's full HD size. So it's just going to be a little bit crisper, the image, when we render it. So let's click on that, and now we can close those render settings down. Cool, so the next thing after that, we're going to basically start off by making a camera. And when we're rendering, we always want to actually have a camera in the scene. It just means that we can then navigate around with the perspective view, but always have our camera in the right place. So to make the camera, I'm going to go over here to the Create panel, and I'm going to go to the camera icon here. So you see that we've got a few different settings here. And the standard one is the circle for making like new shapes, but we're going to use the camera one now, and just make sure that it is on the standard camera, not the Arnold camera. And then we're going to click on the target camera. So that's the camera that we're going to make, and what we'll do is we'll go to the top view, and then we will kind of draw this out in the scene. So I'm going to hold down the left mouse button kind of somewhere over here to the left of the cafe here. And I'm going to hold it down and then drag and then I'm going to let go when I'm over the top of the cafe. So what that does is it creates a camera where I initially clicked, and then the target for the camera, which is basically what the camera will always be looking at, is created where I let go, which is where the shop is. And we can select either of these over here on the left, and then we can use the move tool. And do you remember this shortcut for move? It's W, and we can then position our camera in the scene, and we can also select the target, which is what the camera is kind of pointing towards, and we can also change the position of that in the scene. Now, we're going to want to look through the camera lens to see what it's looking at. So the keyboard shortcut for that is, and this is the only keyboard shortcut, the new one we'll have to remember today, but it's basically C on the keyboard. So if you remember last week, we learned that T was top, and then I think L is left, and F is front, P is perspective, and then the final kind of new one is C for camera. There we go. So now we're looking through the camera. Now, something slightly weird about the cameras in 3ds Max is that you can't like rotate them in the way that you can a normal perspective view. So if I was to hold down the Alt key and the middle mouse button, I could rotate this round. If I try doing that with the camera, I can just kind of move it left to right, pan it around a little bit in the same way that you would be able to pan a perspective view, but I can't rotate it, and I can't zoom in and out in the same way. So the way that we're going to do that is we're going to adjust the actual position of the camera here to kind of adjust where the camera is looking. So the other thing we want to turn on here is show safe frames. So without that turned on, we can't be entirely sure of like where the actual edge of the frame of the camera is. So we don't know exactly what's going to be kind of rendered inside our camera view. But if we turn on show safe frames, you'll see now I've got a kind of black thing at the top and a black thing at the bottom. And that shows us now we know exactly where the top and bottom of our frame is. So that's really useful. Cool. So let's go ahead now and kind of position the camera and position the target. I'm going to move the target up a little bit. Now if you want to zoom in, the easiest way to do it is to select the camera and come over here to the modify panel, and then we'll use the field of view, the FOV setting, and we'll just kind of drag on the two arrows here. So if I hold on the two arrows and drag down, I can zoom in here. And if I want to fine tune that, I can just click on the up or down arrow keys. So let's set it to something like this, and then I'll set maybe I'll move my camera over a little bit, kind of over here. Here we go. And I'll move my target up a little bit. And if you want, you can also change the axis setting for the camera to be local, and that will mean the arrows are kind of aligned with the camera, which kind of makes things a bit easier, like that, and we can then move things up and down a bit more easily. Cool. So I just want to have the cafe right in the middle, so I can actually drag it from this view, and I'll just position it something like this so the cafe is nicely framed. There's not too much kind of empty space at the top and bottom, but then it's not kind of cropped like this or cropped like that. Excellent. So I'm happy with my camera now, so I'm not going to touch that anymore now. Okay, so we're going to go for like a 2-point lighting setup, and that means we're going to have a key light and a fill light. Just those two lights. So let's start off by creating the key light in my scene. So again, I'm going to return to the create panel, and I'm going to go to, this time I'm going to go over to the light bulb icon and click on that. Now here, this is important. We want to change this from photometric to standard. And these lights are just a little bit simpler and easier to work with. And that's why we're using them now. So the one we're going to choose is a target spotlight, and there's a few different ones, and by all means you can have a go with some of the other ones, but for now let's just go with a target spotlight, and I'm going to position this somewhere over to the side of the camera. So you can have your key light either side. You don't really want it where the camera is, but you want it to one side of the camera. So I'm going to position mine to the right of the camera, and again I hold down where I want my light, and then I drag to where the target point of the light is. There we go, and I'll click on the right mouse button just so I don't accidentally make any more lights in my scene. So yeah, the first thing I want to do is to be able to see the result of this. And so if I come up to where it says standard, I can change that to high quality. And now I can actually see the effect of the light in my scene. I can see where the shadows are. And I'm also going to come over here and rename this spotlight. So to do that, just make sure that the spot 001 is selected. And then I click again, like one more time, and I wait, and then I can go in and change the name. So I'm going to call this key for my key light. And you'll see it also automatically changes the name of the target as well. Great. So now I'm just going to lift that up a little bit like this, and I'm going to position this somewhere where I think it's going to be kind of most appealing. So I'm kind of thinking about where the shadow is. Maybe I'll lift it up a bit more, something like this, maybe a bit to the side, you know, something that's going to look attractive and appealing. There we go. Now, because it's a spotlight, it has like a kind of cone where the light actually comes out of, and you can see that this area of the ground is in shadow. Now, if we don't want that, we can increase the area of the cone, basically. And to do that, we go over to the Modify panel, make sure our key is still selected, and we're going to come over to where it says Spotlight Parameters, and we'll click on that, and then we've got the hotspot / beam angle, basically, and we can increase the angle of that. So if I hold on the arrows and drag up, you can see that gets increased now, and you can increase this to you know, whatever you need to in order to make sure that all of the ground is being illuminated and there's no shadow there. Great, and when you do that, you may find that the shadow gets a bit blocky, but that's fine, because when we actually do a render, it will look nice and crisp, so you don't have to worry about that. Great, so now's a good time to do a preview render, or an actual render of this. So let's click on the render frame button here, and this window will open here. And what you want to do is come in here and select the camera from the drop down, and then click on the lock symbol, just so that you don't accidentally it doesn't accidentally render another viewport. And now that we've got that selected, we can click on the render button, and it will give us a render of our scene. Here we go. So this is the result. I'll zoom out a little bit. So you can see the shadows now all looking nice and crisp, and the result of this is all looking completely fine. So I'm happy with that. Okay, so let's move that across to another window, and now we will go ahead and add in the fill light. So you can see from the render that, you know, the result here is completely pitch black, and basically we want the fill light added to soften that blackness, and we want the fill light to be not as bright as the key light, but to kind of just soften those shadows a little bit, so that we have some illumination in these black shadowy areas. So let's go back to the the create panel, make sure we're still on the light, and we'll go for another target spot, and I'm going to go to the top view, and this time I'm going to add this fill light to the other side of the camera. So my key light was on the right, so I'm going to add my fill light to the left, and again I'm going to click where I want the fill light to be. I'm going to just drag it out so that the target is where the cafe is, and I'll click with the right mouse button so that I don't accidentally make any more lights. So again, you'll see now I've got a new light in my scene. Let's click on that again and rename it to fill, F-I-L-L, not P-H-I-L, but you can if you want, but F-I-L-L. Here we go. Now, one thing that I find really useful, and I really recommend this, is when you're dealing with lights, it can get very confusing if you've got more than one light in your scene. And so what I always do, if I've got a new light in my scene, I will go in and turn off the other lights, just so I can see that this light is actually having an effect on my scene. So here, I'm going to select my key light, and I'm going to go to the Modify panel, and I'm just going to go to where it says, sorry, let me just scroll up, where it says light type here, and there's on, the on switch. I'm going to, under general parameters, I'm going to click on the checkbox there to turn that light off. There we go. So it's under general parameters, light type, and then on, basically. So I've turned my key light off, and so now I can see just the result of my fill light, and that's very useful. I know that it's working, I know it's in the scene, and what I can do now is I can go to the side view, and I can just position this in the scene, and I will maybe move it over a little bit like this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this light down because I don't want it as bright as my key light. So to turn it down, we go to the modify panel again, and we're going to look for intensity, and we see intensity here, so let's expand that. And this multiplier basically is the brightness of the light. So 1 is kind of the default brightness. I'm going to turn it down to something like 0.3. So, less than a third or around a third of the light. And you can see now this is looking much dimmer. And let's go back to our key light now, and let's turn that back on. So come up to the top and turn that back on. And now you can see that the fill light is just filling in those shadows quite nicely. And again, I might turn it down even more actually. So let's go back down to that multiplier and set it down to 0.2. And you can see the result there. Great. So let's do another render of this. So again, let's click on the render panel, and I'll click on the render button again to see the results. Here we go. So that's the result of adding the fill light in, and again, it's looking quite nice. But one thing I don't quite like is I've got basically 2 shadows now, and it just looks a little bit messy with those extra shadows in there. So to make this scene kind of cleaner and maybe a bit more appealing, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go into the fill light and just turn the shadows off. So let's do that, and we can do that. We can turn shadows off individually for individual lights. So if I select the fill light, and I scroll down to where it says shadows, and I turn those off. Now, if I do another render now, there we go. You can see it just looks to me a little bit cleaner. We've still got the main shadow from the key light, but we haven't got the shadow from the fill light, and it's just looking a little bit more, aesthetically pleasing. Great. So another thing we may want to do is we may want to soften this shadow, and it's up to you if you do, because it depends what look you're going for. Sometimes nice crisp shadows can look really good, and that kind of mimics what you'd have on a very sunny day. Whereas sometimes a kind of slightly blurry shadow might look nicer if you're going for kind of a softer look. And that sort of mimics more of a kind of cloudy day kind of setting, or if you just don't want such kind of crisp, harsh shadows. So to do that, we will select the key light. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn these shadows, where we have this shadow type drop down, I'm going to turn these to area shadows. So if I click on that, we now have some settings here. But before we adjust those, let's do another render and just have a look. So I will bring this back up and do another render. There we go. So now you see we've got a nice, much softer shadow, which again, it's a different kind of look. And it's up to you in terms of aesthetic judgment which you want for your scene. But here we can see they're nice and soft, which is again, maybe more appealing if that's the kind of thing you're after. So we can change the settings for the shadow, the area shadow. But one thing that's quite useful, if you want to do like comparisons, if you're making small adjustments, it can be quite useful just to make a copy of this render so that we can compare it against any changes we make. So what we can do is we can either save this out. I could click on the save image button, or I could just click on this clone render frame button, and that will create another copy of that, which will appear elsewhere. And we can keep this one kind of here, just so that if we when we re-render our initial one, we can see the side-by-side comparison. So let's go and have a look at those area light settings, and basically what we can do here. For the area light dimensions, if we increase this, we'll get a even softer shadow, and if we reduce it, we'll get a kind of a more crisp shadow, basically, because it's changing the size of the light, basically. And a bigger light gives you a softer shadow, a smaller light gives you a more crisp shadow. But another thing you'll see here is that this shadow actually has a bit of graininess to it, and we can kind of help reduce that graininess by coming in and changing the shadow integrity and also the shadow quality. And I found when I did this that actually the integrity seemed to make the most difference more than the quality. So I'm going to come in, I'm going to set the integrity to like something higher, like 10 maybe. And let's hit enter, and then let's re-render this one. So a higher setting will make the render a little bit slower. So let's just click on render, and It doesn't seem to be too bad in terms of the speed, but you'll see maybe now it's just taking a little bit more time. Great, and if we do this like a side-by-side comparison, you'll have to look pretty closely, and you may not be able to see this on the recording, but this one is a little bit less grainy than this one over here, so it's just looking a little bit nicer. And I could try maybe, if I wanted very high quality, I could turn that up to even higher than 10. So one final thing is how to actually save your renders. And what you can do is just click on this save disk icon here. And then you'll need to go in and find where you want to save them to, basically. So I'm going to click in here into the Week3 folder, and maybe I'll make a new folder here, and I will call it renders. And then I'm going to click in there and save the file in here. So I'll call it render 01. And then what you'll need to do is save as type. You'll need to select here. So I would save it as a PNG file. They don't have any kind of loss of quality. So a JPEG will lose some quality, whereas a PNG will keep all the original quality. So let's save it as that. And then we'll click on save. And you can pick just RGB 24-bit is fine. And then let's click on OK. And now you should find when you navigate to that folder that the image is in there, and you could open it up from there. Great, so that is pretty much the whole of the tutorial for today. So in terms of your kind of self-guided study, it's on the slides, but what I would like you to do is basically finish off this exercise, and keep on uploading the results, the work as you go through it, and the final result to your form thread. But then I want you to also go back and set up the lights for one of the models that you have created from the previous 2 weeks. And again, if you can upload the results to the development journal, and just if you have a look at the final slide here, it's got a reminder just of the kind of things that we want you to be posting about in the development journal. And as I said previously, I'm not expecting you to post something on all of these like for every week, but we do want you to post something from this is the kind of things we are looking for. And by the end of the unit, we do want to see like a bit of each of these areas. So it's a good kind of practice to get into. But definitely show a bit of your work in progress and show the final result. And if you can show any of these other things, that's also going to be just an advantage.